where do we want to take this discussion? Where are we going to? What's the question? What's the burning question?
On the role of women in Judaism.
So maybe as a background, we had an argument between Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Uziel. Rabbi Kook stated that ladies not only cannot hold government positions, but cannot vote, and not in the mayoral race, not to vote for prime minister. And it came out of a certain belief, and there should be one family vote and a family unit.
Is that only for married women? Like if you're a single woman, couldn't vote either?
It seems like a single woman would be her father would vote for her.
Oh, that's not right.
Well, that's Rav Kook's opinion.
Okay.
Rav Uziel says, I don't understand.
In the state of Israel, or
well, this was the argument. This was the early years of the women's suffrage movement, and the big discussion was how are they going to handle? You're building a new country, you're starting a new world, and much of the early years of the State of Israel, even before the founding of the State of Israel, was spent on throwing away old social norms, new social norms, a new person, a new country, you're starting from scratch. And the question was, in our yeshuvim, on the kibbutzim, on the moshavim, who should be voting, who should be holding government office? So obviously those who were not observant didn't ask Rav Kook this question. But those who were, they were religious groups of Jews, kibbutzim, moshavim, they wanted to know what is his opinion as the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel on this matter. And his opinion was, no, ladies don't vote and they don't hold elected office.
That was Rabbi Kook.
That was Rabbi Kook, who, like we've pointed out before, normally is portrayed as a very liberal, open-minded thinker. And again, I'm not attacking Rav Kook on the stance. Rather, his stance was, he felt that this was a way to preserve the family unit, so to speak. Rav Uziel begged to differ, very harshly actually. He felt a number of things. The first one was, how could it be that a lady would be obligated to listen to somebody who she had no say in choosing? Meaning she's going to have to pay taxes also, she's going to have to listen to his laws and legal rulings, all kinds of things. So why should she not have a say when it comes to choosing who's going to be the next leader, or the next governor, or mayor, or whoever it's going to be? And the second thing he said was, why would a lady not be allowed to hold elected office? Rav Uziel quotes Rav Kook's two main concerns. Rav Kook's two concerns were, one, a halachic concern, and two, what he considered a practical concern. I'll tell them to you. The first was a halachic concern of the Talmud saying that in the Sanhedrin, in the elite Supreme Court of Jewish law, a lady was not allowed to be part of the Sanhedrin, because the Sanhedrin was essentially a group of people that forced people to follow their rulings, and it wasn't fitting, it wasn't appropriate for a lady to force herself on a position of authority upon men. That's what the Talmud suggests. Rav Uziel has an answer to this question and says that no one's forcing anyone here. This is rather they're choosing her. She's being elected. You're having a democratic process, and they're showing that they want this lady to be their leader, to be their guide, to be their governor, their mayor, their judge, whatever it would be. This is your halachic argument doesn't hold water. He said in the second argument, Rav Kook considered a practical one, and he said that a lady doesn't have what was this? Anyone have the article from last time? Something along the lines of a lady being too
understanding, right? Too sensitive, but also not. I'm going to use, for lack of a better word, not smart enough to be able to preside over such a legal ruling.
I thought there was another side to this.
I don't think it was smart.
And I think that the other side was that when a lady...
I'm looking up the article right now. I have it in my phone.
No.
Yeah, you talk.
I thought that the reason that some of these people thought the way they thought was because they thought that when a woman had her period, that she wouldn't be allowed to
be logical enough.
Exactly, good.
Logical.
Logical. And that's exactly it. That was it. That some people just couldn't.
I've never seen that.
I think they feared the competition. Because if you eliminate women, you eliminate 50% of who's trying to get the same job as you.
Exactly.
Right. Paula is on the dial.
Oh, she is on the dial.
Here.
I love you too. So
it wasn't because they felt like they have kids, they have babies, they will be distracted.
No. Let me. I have the article right here.
I think they also could have thought. I think you said this last week or sometime before, that a woman might not be hard enough.
That's what I
hold the
exactly,
line.
Right.
If she
That's
had to make
she
a
was
hard.
too sensitive. She would see the other point of view.
But they couldn't have envisioned Golda Meir.
Right.
They couldn't have envisioned all the
Good point.
women
And
we
Golda
know.
was
Not like
Yeah.
that. Who sometimes actually are more harsh than.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to read through the
Exactly.
article that we were
Go up against
studying.
Hillary Clinton.
Rabbi Uziel thought it was unjust to expect women to be bound to decisions over which they had no say. Some opponents of women's suffrage suggested that women's understanding was limited, and they were not competent to vote. To this, Rabbi Uziel noted that many men had limited understanding. Should they too be deprived of the right to vote?
Yes.
Moreover, Rabbi Uziel wrote that women were endowed with intelligence and sound judgment no less than men, and that experience demonstrates this to be true. Rabbi Uziel rejected the argument that letting women vote would be a threat to morality and family life. This is a baseless claim and should carry no weight in this debate. One opponent thought that women should be excluded from voting or holding office based on women's status in biblical times. Rabbi Uziel brushed his objection aside, noting that it had no bearing on the question at hand. Women as well as men were created in God's image. They had a basic right to be able to vote for those who would have authority to pass laws which would affect them. Not only would there be no prohibition to women's Not only was there no prohibition to women's suffrage, but depriving them of this right would be unjust and would cause them humiliation and pain.
I like Rabbi Uziel.
Yes, I like it.
Having concluded that women had the right to vote, Rabbi Uziel then turned to the question of whether women had the right to be elected to public office. Halakhic literature includes the notion that women should not hold positions of authority over men, like I mentioned. After analyzing these sources carefully, Rabbi Uziel found that there was no objection to women being in positions of authority if the community willingly accepted them in these offices. Therefore, women who were elected to office exert authority on the basis of communal approval. Rabbi Uziel stated that although men and women would be sitting together during these public deliberations, this was no breach of modesty or morality. So again, the fact that they're sitting together, not going to be a problem. These were not social events, but serious discussions and debates in which participants would participate with all due propriety.
So as far as Rabbi Kook was concerned, women had to be on the one side and men on the other. And Uziel said they could sit together to discuss.
Yes.
Okay.
In another responsum, Rabbi Uziel offered halachic grounds to allow women to serve as civil judges, as long as the community accepted their authority to judge. He did not personally think it was a good idea for women to serve as judges because of their innately compassionate natures. This was Rabbi Uziel. But he presented the halachic justification for them to be judges. Meaning, again, I presented to you when we did this, when we had this original discussion, that Rav Uziel's style in halakha is that unless you can actually prohibit something, you could share your opinion, but you can't say that it's prohibited. You can't say that you're not allowed to do it. So Rav Uziel says, my personal opinion is that ladies have a compassionate nature, and he questions their ability to judge in a harsh manner. That seems to be, but Rav Uziel says, but it's not halal. I can't force this opinion on anybody. It could be that he's wrong, it could be that he's right, it could be that... It says, so I'm presenting the halachic justification that would allow for a woman to hold office as a civil judge, even though he personally felt that maybe it wasn't a good idea. So talk. Rav Uziel, who's painted as a traditionalist, actually comes off here as not so traditional. And Rabbi Kook, who comes off normally as a liberal, open-minded rabbi, comes off here as pretty traditional and conservative.
Well, I think the future, which is us, has proved them wrong. I mean, just look at the world. I mean, look at the number of women who are presidents or prime ministers of their country, or have been. Look at the judges throughout the world that are women that sit. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a Jewish woman on the American Supreme Court. So the future, I mean, no matter what these guys talked about, it was nice, but look at the future.
Has the future actually fixed this problem?
Well, I don't think it fixes how people think. You don't fix what's in the mind. Because most of that goes on with just thoughts that in and out, in and out, in and out. It's with the mind you try to figure out the mind. It's impossible. But if you take a look at the results, what are the results in society? What are the results in the world?
There still hasn't been a female president in this country.
Yes, but we're getting pretty close. I mean, you've got Supreme Court, You've got, and I think a lot of that has to do with mindsets that people bring, old attitudes that people bring. We all know that. Why would Hillary Clinton, at this point in time, even think of running for president? She wants to break that mindset. She wants to say, hello, here I am. I got through the glass
Do you think she's going to be successful? I mean,
I don't know.
The fact that 70 years have passed or 80 years since the writing of this article, how much has changed? It's changed, yes, and there are ladies holding public office, judges on the Supreme Court. It's a very slow process.
Change always takes.
A slow process maybe in this country, but in Israel they already had a woman as a president, and in India they had a woman as a president.
Well, yeah.
And other
You look
parts
at the rest of the world.
they've
Exactly.
already had these things. They haven't held women back.
So are we possibly not on the cutting edge of human rights like we think we are?
Absolutely.
Are Americans...
in order of human rights. We're
We're
deferring
totally-
to other rights first.
That's
We have a
right.
black president now.
Right, we've
gotta
spoken
go
about this
on.
before.
And everyone has been fighting him to, won't let him get anything done because the
We've
people
been-
that didn't vote for him resent that there's a black president sitting there.
We've been speaking
That's an
about...
assumption. I don't think that.
I don't agree with that assumption either. I don't agree
Let's
with
not
that
get into
assumption.
We've been... Politics aside, I did mention that Rav Peretz, when President Obama was elected, was very happy about that. He said this was a tikkun chevrati, was a social injustice that was fixed. That in this country, where just not so long ago black people had no rights, and today you have a black person who's the president. Forget whether you want him to be the president, not the president because of his ideas or laws he's trying to pass. That has nothing to do with his skin color. Rather, that has everything to do with his policies. It could be a white person with the same policies, and I wonder I wonder what the attitude would be towards him. But that's been a social injustice that's been fixed. Israel still hasn't had a Sephardic prime minister in all the years of its history, even though Sephardim are the majority of the state of Israel.
Really?
There are more Sephardim than Ashkenazim in the state of Israel. How's it happen? Okay, they're still...
And has somebody run and not been elected, or no one even got up to bat?
half and half. For example, even in the Israeli Knesset, as much as there was a Golda Meir once who was the prime minister, if you look at the number of men and the number of women in the Israeli Knesset,
It's
it's a joke. It's
very low.
and salaries in most first world countries, ladies that do the same job as a man does don't make the same salary that a man does. And why? What's the reason for that?
The volumes. There are whole sections of libraries written about this. There are degrees you can get in women's issues in America about this.
At the turn of the century, with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, that was the time that men felt that women weren't strong enough, and also it would take jobs away from men, and the women could work in the home.
It's amazing how this argument keeps getting recycled. I just had this argument with somebody about immigrants coming to America, taking away American jobs. Specifically, we were talking about people from Mexico. And I tried very kindly to make the argument that the jobs that these people are working, you are not working. No,
That's exactly, you're 100%
when there's, I remember when my brother was getting married, and they were trying to pass a law here about sending people who had immigrated illegally back to Mexico, and the Hispanic community in California, at least Southern California, went on strike for 3 days. I don't know if you remember this. It was not so long ago. It could be 2006, 2007. I don't know. Hold me exactly to this date. Yeah. Sure, they decided that they were supporting...
They're not going to work.
They're not going to work. And we went to LA to buy suits and dresses for the wedding, and the whole town was literally shut down. Brought to its knees. LA. Brought to its knees. And the question is, there's so much discussion, they're going to take away these jobs and those jobs. That argument, I'm not sure it actually holds much water. As much as it is...
I don't think it holds any water.
Normally you find that about ladies or about Jews, it's always going to be something racist towards somebody else. I think there are enough jobs in this country to go around. There's not enough people who want to work in them.
It's not my opinion. This is what
sure.
men
We're
present.
believing.
And women didn't like it at all because women were working too. And they didn't like that their role had to be a place in the home, They'd hire
Look
a
at World
maid
War
or
II.
something like that.
World War II. The
Rosie
men went to war. The women went to the factories. And then as soon as the war was over, the women came back to the kitchen.
No, I always
And
joke.
everybody was
Very
happy
uptight.
until our generation came to college in the 60s. Then it was all over.
I always joke with my wife that the Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic community, the whatever community you like to call it, are the first feminists in the Jewish community because none of the men work. They all study and learn,
And
all the ladies hold jobs.
That's right.
So I said, perhaps that's the men are going to work, the men are going to study and to babysit, and the ladies are going to work.
No. You know that's not true.
Why?
Because the woman comes home and she cooks. And
Oh, so you're saying the man doesn't do anything?
he does.
She
Okay.
works and she does all that. Of course she does.
I'm feeding Panovich for Shabbos. I could not live like that.
This woman's thing sounds
Panovich, where
terrific.
all the men learn full time their whole life. And I was there with the family. The woman had broken her foot. The husband was gone the whole Shabbos. He came home at 9 o'clock in the morning. We made Kiddush. We had chant. He didn't even give it to her. I felt like not even the joy of the fruit of her labor does she get. She was happy. But I said, I personally, I could not live like this. I could not do it.
Can we go here?
Yes.
Yeah. One second.
Yeah.
I'm bringing you a book.
While he's away, I think what most women will say they want are options.
Sure, but then men
Options.
also don't have so many options. Men now also want more options, and there are many more men who want to be stay-at-home dads.
Yes.
Many more who like that option. Because you can say men also didn't have options. They had to provide for their family, whether they liked it or not, right?
Exactly.
And women also say, I want options. But it's not just right to say, well, a woman should have options, and a man should also.
Absolutely. And I think the
every
younger
couple-
generation is taking
then
that.
every couple has to work it out themselves.
That's
and
right.
And that can get complicated.
Well,
Very
there's no right or
complicated.
no wrong.
If you're in a community that has certain mindsets, that could get very
It can
complicated.
get very complicated. Or you don't have a community, you're isolated,
Yeah.
to forge your own thing can get complicated because we still, even people who are very, I don't know, like my husband who was married to a black person, at that time in the 60s, that wasn't common. And to forge your own,
very hard.
way of doing things, it's
Very
very
hard.
hard.
Do you remember when Sammy Davis Jr. married a white woman?
Yeah.
Everybody was like, oh my God.
Well,
Anyway, that's a different
the consciousness married a black
The
woman.
consciousness
No, but that's
of the
that's
people
roles,
have shifted and
roles.
changed over 30, 40 years.
But it's roles.
I wanted to go where Tamar's going, but before I do that, you brought this up. I grew up in San Diego, born and raised in San Diego. And maybe I live in a bubble, maybe people who grew up like me didn't have the same experience. I grew up that innately racism was a bad thing. Maybe I'm crazy, right? Like you weren't allowed to say certain words or certain things or make certain assumptions, and
You grew up with multiculturalism.
but in like the most West Coast way possible.
Exactly.
And I remember when I moved to yeshiva on the East Coast. I'm not talking. It's not a religious community thing. I moved to a community on the East Coast. The East Coast in general, Jewish and not Jewish, is much more. I don't know if the word is conservative or traditional, but there's a reason why certain people made it to the West Coast and certain people didn't move out of the East Coast. And I started hearing all kinds of words from respectable people that I had never heard in my life.
In New York or here?
The East Coast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the fact that you could call a black person with a word that starts with an N, and that was normal in the context of the discussion.
Jay gets
Someone who speaks
admitted.
Spanish, so you call them by a derogatory word with an S that starts with all kinds of. And I was very put off by it. I could not believe, like, what are you living in the same country that I'm living in? And then I realized that really there's worlds to go in this country. Even I mean, we think that here, people are pretty open-minded out here. I'm not speaking for everybody.
Remember the show All in the Family?
Yeah.
No.
Sure.
That was before his time.
It was about a Brooklyn family, and he was very, very bigoted.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Bunker.
And it was very, very funny. And the woman stayed home, and she would shuffle her feet behind the husband. She used to walk shuffling her feet, and she would yell, Archie!
So
Consciousness changes.
things have changed over time. The things, even things that
They even have that on TV.
that in the Jewish community, things that from me and my wife are okay, for our parents could be very different. I mean, they're just, in a good way, a bad way, like all kinds of ways. But things change, and you see that these things are changing. But it hasn't finished. I mean, we just had a lady at our house, non-Jewish lady. She came, interestingly enough, she met my wife somewhere, and she figured, oh, you're a spiritual leader. I have some spiritual problems I want to talk to you about. Like a corporate lady here, and she lives in the neighborhood. And she's Asian. And the reason I'm saying she's Asian, I don't normally say it. She's very proud of her identity. And she was speaking to my wife about this, about that, her boyfriend, and she's struggling, and her boyfriend is Hispanic. He's from Mexico. And her family has disowned her because you can't date out of the community.
I understand that.
Late 20s. Okay? But not so late. Maybe 27.
Asian community.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Now she's telling, and I heard her speak about this. I'm like, oh, it's so hard, and we're sharing experiences, and then on a different occasion entirely, she told me that she had quit her job. So you had a pretty good job. Why'd you quit your job? And the information she shared was because they gave a promotion to one of the guys who worked with me, and he became my manager, and he's also Mexican, and there's no way in the world that I'm going to work for someone who's Mexican.
She came out and said that.
And she quit her job.
She has some issues.
And she's dating and
Well, yeah, very. But the other,
that's the worst.
and she's angry at her parents for not accepting it. Now, I
Send her to a therapist. She's a
the thing is, at first, I didn't actually hear what. I said, "Can you say that again?" And it was like in a public forum. Like she wasn't embarrassed about it. It wasn't even like sometimes people are there like closet racist. But it was like right out there. And I thought about it. So clearly, if he got a promotion, that means that he was good enough to do his job and be your manager, right? Yeah. So what difference does it make where he comes? Maybe I'm. I don't know. Maybe I come from a different place.
Promotion if she was equally qualified.
That could also be. It could be she was angry at him. But to the point where you quit your job, she said, I cannot work for someone who's a Mexican.
She didn't want to work for him though. But she went.
But
she went
she's living with him. That's just interesting.
Yeah. You got that too. But it just shows you that it's not only racism amongst.
It's not just blacks and whites. It goes other ways.
I can tell you that I have many kids that work for me that are Vietnamese and Chinese and even an Iranian who work for me. And I can tell you that all these kids have been told by their parents that they can't go out with people who aren't from their own race because they won't accept it. Mm-hmm. And that they go to school regularly, every weekend they have to go to school to learn whatever language or whatever customs that they're from. Mm-hmm. But they don't go out with anybody unless they are the same.
But that's the same with Jews.
Exactly the same.
I'm in multiculturalism business with my au pairs. They come from all over the world. Right. Do you know what? I say to them, make some American friends. You're here in America. This is a golden opportunity. You're on the college campus. Make an American friend. If the girl is German, she only hangs with other Germans.
That's right.
If she's Chinese, I've got one I'm going to see after I leave here. They only want to hang with other Chinese people. They find them.
Like
if Israelis, they only want to find the other Israelis. So there's something inside of human nature that makes people want to.
But I don't find that to be a person wants to stay within their own. What's the problem? But you mentioned just Jews. By the way, I thought it was interesting. With going on a limb, we can quote all kinds of people here. You mentioned Golda Meir.
Yes.
Golda Meir once got in a very big argument with someone by the name of Rabbi Meir Kahana.
Oh yes.
Not just about politics, but listen to this one.
Is that the book you're reading over there?
A number of books I'm reading from all kinds of places.
There's a Meir Kahana book there.
Oh, so that's probably either mine, my wife's. Who knows? And we have a whole library of them. And Golda Meir had made a statement in Knesset urging Israeli youth not to date Arabs. Yeah. Just Israelis, stay with the Israelis, be with the Israelis. And
he was Jews because they're Israeli Arabs.
Right, well then Israeli Arabs was it still was the beginning of its phases. What is an Israeli Arab? Mm-hmm. And so Rabbi Meir Kahana called her a racist.
Meir Kahana? Yeah, love to.
There's a reason I'm sharing with you this story. Called her a racist.
That's funny.
So she said, how do you have the right to call me a racist? Great question. And he said something that's worth thought, whether you like it or not, it's worth thought. He said, what's your reason for telling people just to marry Israelis? Just to date Israelis? He said, my reason is because I believe that God said that Jews have to stay with Jews. Not because we're better, not because we're worse, just because we have to, that's one of those rules that God gave us, that we have to stay with Jews. But what's motivating you? It's not God. It can only be racism. So according to you, if there's no God in the picture, there's no religion in the picture, so why shouldn't someone Israeli marry someone who's an Arab?
Well, it would dilute an Israeli state.
But that's racism. That sounds like the Third Reich. It's something to think about. I just threw it out there. Something to think about. You can learn from everyone, not just from...
I think that's an
what
interesting...
I would like to think, I might be totally wrong, is that even though Golda Meir wasn't religious, that there was still like a little piece in her which felt like Jews should be.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank God.
You know what? I sometimes I've had this discussion. I hate when people say that Jews are ethical, or that Judaism is all about bringing ethics and morals to the world. Because that's also a racist statement that we make. Because we're not more ethical than other people are. And Confucius might have been an ethical guy. Mahatma Gandhi might have been an ethical guy. He wasn't Jewish. Why do we have a monopoly on ethics? We're the most ethical people in the world. I could say we're the most divinely connected people in the world. That's what I believe. I believe that God spoke to us and that God gave us a way. That's fine. But I can't be more moral than somebody else. More ethical than I'm taking away their ability to be moral and ethical.
I do want to say that in regards to the Asian community, which is really large, going over to the JCC like I do with the community college classes there and everything, is that I have admiration for the way that when their kids come out of preschool, I mean, that is tops for preschool. They all want their kids to go there for preschool. But when their kids come out, they sit with them, they speak their language, and that I'd like to see Jews do.
I did the same thing with my parents. We came out, I sat with them, we spoke in Hebrew. I didn't speak English at all.
That's why you still speak Hebrew.
There you go.
And that's what I'd like to see.
You're right.
But the not wanting to melt is not racism, as long as it's not done in a racist. It could be racism. I mean, like I've told people before, I've had non-Jews at my Shabbat tables, and not someone who's thinking of converting. Why not? I'm certain things at the synagogue. I mean, there's not what we mentioned from Rabbi Uziel. Rabbi Uziel said we first share a basic humanity, after which we are Jewish. We're not innately different. We have different goals that we want to get to, different places we want to go, and therefore we have to do things that are different than someone who wants to go in a different direction. But that doesn't make us better. Remember about autopsies, like, you could do an autopsy on a non-Jew but not on a Jew. Things like that Rabbi Kook was suggesting. Rabbi Uziel says that can only come from a place that's not healthy. It cannot come from a place which is Jewish.
Now,
No, go ahead.
I think that the whole class when you started and so on, about the women's issue, I think one of the things which is happening very much now and where the Frum community has problems with are the women's movements inside of Judaism.
This is where I wanted to go.
Right.
See, because I can't fix the way Congress works or the way the Knesset works, but I am a rabbi and we are Jews and we are part of a Jewish community.
The women at the kotel who want, and so on.
This is now we know where we want to go. You see?
Well, that's the reform.
What?
Have you heard about the Rabbah?
The Rabbah. We're definitely going to talk about the Rabbah.
What's the Rabbah?
We're going to talk about it. I wanted to mention something Tamar said, and then we could get to all this because this is good stuff. I don't think we're going to finish it today, but we can start it. We can open up the can of worms. Has anyone ever read a ketubah before?
Yes. Yes.
The marriage contract that's signed under the chuppah?
Yes.
I've never read it, I've signed it.
Do you normally do that? You sign without reading what you're signing away?
I got married, I signed it and I shouldn't have.
Whenever I go to the cell phone, make you sign like 30 pages. I'm signing my life away. For sure, there's something in there that, like they're gonna own my house. I'm sure. We never check. We just sign it. The ketubah shouldn't work that way. The ketubah, whenever I marry off a couple, we learn with them first. But the one meeting we have before we do a wedding is you have to know what the ketubah says. You have to know every detail that happens under the chuppah. It's not a paper ceremony. It's a real thing. You have to. It's like signing a mortgage contract. You got to know what's going on over here. So, in the ketubah, there's a big debate between two kinds of Sfaradim. We mentioned this before. Not just Ashkenazim and Sfaradim fight. Also, Sfaradim fight with Sfaradim. There are two kinds of Sfaradim. Those who are actually Spanish from Sfarad, meaning Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. Yemen are not from Spain.
That's separate. Yeah.
And then you have another group which are technically Mizrahim. They are not Sephardic. They are from Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, that whole region. Those are not Sephardic Jews, technically. But over the years, these two communities have merged to become one. Kind of like in Europe, there were Eastern Europeans and Western Europeans, and some who were from maybe the Balkan region who weren't either of them, but they were kind of mixed around there. And then today they're all dubbed Ashkenazim, right? But it's a very inaccurate term. That there are many different groups and schools of thought in those places. So between the Sfaradim from the Mizrach, the Orient, let's call it, and the Jews of Sfarad, of Spain, there was a debate whether in the ketubah, after the husband essentially promises his wife that he's going to take care of her and support her and finance her and clothe her, and if he has to, even the clothing from his back he's going to give her, and what's going to happen if they get divorced, that he's going to support her and give her this amount of money, everything that happens in the ketubah. At the end, there was a debate whether the husband, additionally, on top of signing the ketubah, should say, I also swear with a solemn oath that I will uphold this contract. Meaning, it's going to have not just the status of a contract, but also the status of what we call a shuvuah chamura, a severe oath. It's an oath that he's taking, which means he can't just break his contract, but he's also going to be breaking his word. The rabbis from Sfarad opposed adding this in, and the rabbis from the Orient, like for example, Rabbi Uziel, added this in, meaning to make it worse. At the end, the Chatan makes a special oath under the chuppah. I promise that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm upholding this contract. I spent 6 months studying the laws of marriage from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. This is one of my areas of expertise is weddings. You might think it's like 20 minutes under the chuppah. A lot goes into that 20 minutes under the chuppah. Shouldn't be 20 minutes. It should be much longer than that. But I asked Rav Peretz which side he goes with. Do you make an oath or do you not take an oath? And he said, don't take the oath. I said, why not? And he said, because the Chatan, especially in a religious community, doesn't actually uphold the ketubah. And he said, in a non-religious community, he doesn't uphold the ketubah either. I'm going to explain. When people get divorced, how many of them go to the ketubah? Oh, we promised $50,000 and this and that, and everyone should depart and go on their way.
No, they go to court.
They go to court and they sue each other for things they don't have, and houses they don't own, and cars they don't want to drive, and just so they can put the other one out of, to make him bankrupt, to put him in prison, or whatever, they can ruin her life, or whatever it is. She has a business, you're not part of the business, I want to take half of it. Well, you never helped her, so why would you take half of it? Right? All kinds of things that happen when people get divorced. So her parents said, someone who promises to uphold the ketubah, when it comes time for him to get divorced, is actually violating his ketubah, not just the contract, but he's now breaking his oath that he was going to uphold the ketubah. He said, but in the religious community there's a different problem. This is the problem that Tamar brought up. In the communities, I don't want to label anyone, because there are different communities within these communities, but essentially the Orthodox model among those who are not just observant, but the yeshiva crowd, those who go to yeshivas and kollels and those kind of things, there's this, for the last 60 years about, this movement of people who don't work, men who go to study, and they don't become rabbis either. They don't become mohalim or shochim. They sit and learn their whole life, till the day they die. And some of them will do jobs on the side if they have to, like a mashgiach somewhere or something like that, but for the most part they're sitting and learning. And they make a very small stipend. I'm talking about a few $100s a month. In Jerusalem, the most you can make in a kollel is about $600 a month.
Yeah, but don't they get X amount of money from the government too?
That's including you get about 800 shekels a month from the government, so it's $200 about.
And for each child?
But everyone gets money for each
Yes,
child.
but they get, the more children they have, the more money they get.
Yeah, if everyone else made more children, then they would also get. I mean, I'm talking about specifically what someone who studies Torah makes.
Your child has to be born in the hospital. I think that's a new thing now.
I don't know. I didn't do it. So
I think that's a good idea.
in America, I remember that in yeshiva when I was in Baltimore, the kollel guys would make $70 a week for 7 o'clock till 6:30 p.m. And then if they would study another 2 hours at night, they would get another $30 a week. So they came home with a grand total of $400 a week. You're talking about married guys. Single guys pay to go to school. The married guys,
$100 a week a month.
about $100
a month.
Yeah,
400.
if they do, most people can't. I mean, they also have to help at home, so they can't do the nighttime. Ones they make about $70 a week.
Sounds unhealthy. I mean, the body needs to move.
You move enough, don't you? You walk around and scream at people and all kinds of make coffee. You know, people who work 9 to 5 jobs aren't moving anymore. So. You didn't know that? You walk to the machine, you walk back, you go to the bathroom, I don't know, things like that. So, I'm trying to tell Betty they're not sitting down all day. They make coffee sometimes. So, you then have the other half of the coin, which is so who's making the money. So you have the wife is going out to work, and very often, and this is part of what I wanted to discuss, but not yet this second. Most often than not, she hasn't gone to college, and so the job that she's going to be working is going to be some secretary position or something that anyone else in the world could do. It's not something unique to the fact that she's a Jewish wife of a kollel guy, right? And so she's coming home, let's say, with a lot of money. She's making $40,000 a year.
That's big for what she does.
I'm saying, or she's a teacher without any credentials. She's a teacher for Jewish studies or whatever, whatever else it takes. You can think of the jobs that someone could do, and then she has a child, so she's not working for a while, and then she has another child, she's not working again, and then they have children at home, and then he's at yeshiva, so who's taking care of the kids? You can imagine that this is the society that's being created under our thumbs. In Israel and also in America, not just in Israel. Right now. It's been going on for 60 years. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately has become very mainstream. To the point where it's normal for us to get a phone call. There's a girl, she's looking for a shidduch. She calls up my wife or myself and says, I'm looking for a guy who will not go to work.
Really?
Now you may have never heard of such a thing before. I'm looking...
That's what they learn in STEM.
So they go to seminaries where they'll teach them
the ideal.
The ideal is to marry somebody who's going to study Torah his whole life.
Wow.
And I'll take it a step further. When I was dating, and I'm going to explain the other side of the coin in just a second. When I was dating, there were very often girls who would turn down a shidduch suggestion because I was considered a working person because I taught in a yeshiva. I did the same thing the other guy was doing. Just I was giving back. That's what I was making a little bit of a salary. I was teaching. That was considered. Oh, you might as well work at McDonald's. You know, like it was. Wow. We don't want someone who works. And I remember once speaking to the father of one of these girls. I said, I don't know. I've never in my life heard of a problem with somebody who's going to bring a parnassa home, a livelihood home.
Especially teaching Torah.
Right.
I didn't know.
It got worse. It got worse when I became the rabbi of the community. That's already like you're not even in yeshiva. You're already with people. That's you're like so bad. The certain things look. So I'll tell you. And when I spoke to this man, he said, you know what it means for us when you're teaching or working is that means you weren't good enough to stay and learn. Okay, that was the headspace.
That would be nice if everybody who was running full time was really serious.
Thank you.
Now that would be the case, but that's not the truth.
Now let me tell you how it looks like from inside the walls of the yeshiva. Sure, you're there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6:30 in the evening. Physically, you're there. While I was busy taking smicha tests and testing on different parts of Jewish law and then going to give classes in the evenings, and there were those guys that just sat there with a book and on their cell phone under the book, or they made many cups of coffee throughout the day. They just back and forth and back and forth, or they were busy standing in the front entrance, smoking a cigarette or whatever else, right, talking to their friends, hanging out in the back of the room. And so those of us who are very serious, we're somehow always in the same group of those people who don't actually. And I'll tell you, from the inside, you have a big percentage of people who really study. They really learn. It's not a fake. They really are studying. And even those guys who don't actually end up going to teach. I mean, do you know what it's like for a person to be 60 years old, 70 years old, and he's been studying Torah his whole life? And it's basically a walking, talking encyclopedia. Anything a younger student of us needs to know, it's like a professor. Kind of, it's someone you go to and say, I don't understand what it's talking about. And he'll pull out this volume and that volume, the third. This is a person who's really studying Torah. But you have to imagine that there are not that many people who for all those years have actually been studying Torah so much. It could be for a very practical reason. It could be that I have to be in yeshiva because that's what looks good, but my family doesn't have any food at home, so I'm going to be sneaking out of yeshiva to go work at a job that's under the table so nobody will know about it. And so how do you expect a guy like that to learn? He's not able to do it. He's going to sit in the room and the whole time he's thinking, how am I going to pay the electricity bill? How am I going to pay the water bill? How am I going to pay for the kids' tuition? How am I going to pay for food for Shabbat? How am I going to pay my rent? That's what he's thinking about the whole day. So even if he wants to study, he won't be able to study.
Sounds stressful.
Very stressful. And then you have the other half of the coin. Suddenly all of the parnasah, the livelihood, falls on the wife's shoulders, who, like Tamar said, in very many cases is not just the one who's working, but also the one who's taking care of the kids, also the one who's making the food, also the one who's cleaning the house, also the one who's doing the laundry. And it's an extreme overload on one end and extreme stress on the other guy. And I'll tell you that
I had something to say too, Dad.
he's sharing. He says, both my parents work. Why are you wasting your time on this discussion, right? So, I'll share with you, I'm all for both partners in a marriage. I think it's very healthy when both people are bringing something home. But I can tell you that, especially when we're still living in a very traditional mindset, even if the world looks a little bit different than it did 80 years ago, it's very stressful for a man to come home and not be bringing anything home with him. Not the part of being emasculated that his wife is making something. That's okay. I don't know that most men mind if their wife is coming home with a few $1,000s in the door. There could be some crazy people who do. But it's very stressful for a guy to come home, see this and that on the third day, and he's not able to do anything about it. And the next morning he still has to go back and study more and do more. And it's one thing if there was like a cap on it. And I remember when I was in yeshiva, so the day
on what?
On how long you'd be doing this. For example,
there are groups where you go to Kollel when you get married, but once there's a baby, or even after a year.
So here you have this.
Yeah, that's Chabad.
There are in the world. You have research students, you have people who are working through their PhD thesis, and they're living off of all kinds of grants and those kind of or their parents are helping them through college still, even because there will be a certain point in time where they're going to draw a line and they're past that hurdle. And now unless someone goes to medical school, you're talking about it could be 10, 15 years if he specializes in something and wants to become an expert in it, until he's even bringing money home.
Correct.
But for him it's worth it because in 15 years everything he worked for is going to be coming back to him. They say, insurance, the doctors aren't making enough money. I've never seen a doctor who's dying of starvation. They might not be making what they were making once, but they're coming home with a salary, with a parnasah. And then if you've been to the doctor, you know exactly how much they charge for every little thing that they do. And so that's worth it. But what if a person is doing this and he knows there is no end to this process? It's going to be forever.
Depressing.
It's very depressing for the man.
So now hear this. When I came to yeshiva,
but he's choosing it.
I got a sheet. I wonder if it's in my book.
Right. He's choosing it, but if you live in a community where this is what's expected,
They're not always choosing to do it.
They're just doing what they're supposed to do.
It's a social norm. When I came to yeshiva, you have to pass a certain amount of tests before you can get your smicha certificate.
Correct.
And what they do is they have a date on top. That's the first day you started studying. Mm-hmm. This was unique to my yeshiva in Yerushalayim, where Rabbi Peretz is a Rosh Yeshiva. To date, let's say I came in August of 2008, and then you have to take about 300 tests, 400 tests, something along those lines. And they give you, depending on the track you're studying, depending on how many topics you want to, you could become like a bachelor's rabbi, a master's degree rabbi, a PhD rabbi, depending on what track you're choosing to study. And every year they reevaluate you and see if you should be doing more, you should be doing less, where you should go. they give you an amount of time that you're allowed to stay in the yeshiva for. And the amount of time is somewhere between 4 years till 7 years. After that, they throw you out. They're going to throw you out. What if I want to study my whole life? So Rabbi Peretz's answer is, you can keep studying your whole life, but you've got to start giving back to the community that's been supporting you until now. And so I'm giving you this amount of time. It also motivates you to study when you know there's a deadline to how long you can be doing this for, and you're able to finish. And for me, I'll give you my personal story was I was single, and I didn't want to be in kollel, in yeshiva, when I was married. I knew that I wouldn't be able to support my family, so I wanted to do this when I was single. And I remember my rabbis from Baltimore, and even some people from here, giving me such a hard time. Who becomes a rabbi when they're single? I said, you're not going to be there when I'm married with a kid to pay my bills. So don't tell me now how I should. So I finished everything before I was married. And for me, that was when already before I was married, I had a job and I had a salary and I was able to take. Now, Baruch Hashem, so I don't know if it's really considered a salary, but it's something. I come home with something. I could buy some salad for Shabbat, things like that, right? And
I think that comes from your upbringing.
Yeah.
Of course it does.
Do you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Sure.
You obviously can't.
But my parents, when they found out I was going to be a rabbi, today they're very proud of me. When they found out I was going to be a rabbi, it wasn't like, what kind of job is that for a Jewish kid? That's other people's parents. My parents were just very worried, how are you going to make a living?
Yeah, so you came from a practical...
Their worry is not unjustified. It's very hard to make a living as a rabbi. Anyone who you know who's a rabbi, unless they're like one of those sleazy businessman rabbis, if he's like a real rabbi, chances are he's living off of close to nothing. Yeah. But it's something. It's something that you come home with. And it's an ideal and it's a goal. And all my brothers are either in high tech, or I have one brother in pre-med. And I did I took my SATs. I have 4 years of college under my belt. I never finished with a bachelor's degree. I never finished that step. And that's not forever. It could be. But I found it what it is that I wanted to do. And today, Baruch Hashem, I'm not complaining. And my parents are very happy that that's where I went. But part of the upbringing was you could do whatever you want. But you have to find a way to be responsible about it.
Absolutely.
What
not
happens,
everyone has that upbringing.
No,
what happens, that's exactly what she was saying.
Exactly.
What happens when you grow up in a society where bringing home a livelihood is not considered important? And that might sound funny to you,
so who's going
but
to support that? I mean, somebody has to bring home a life. Somebody in the family has to, because the money has to come from somewhere.
Or what if...
Some people
what
are
if,
out of touch.
Can I pause my recording? I'm pausing my recording for 1 second. You don't expect that someone. Why would someone choose to go to college then? If nobody's going to help them out and nobody's going to even on an emotional level, nobody's supporting you, nobody's telling you it's a good thing for you to do. In fact, the guy who's sitting in yeshiva, he's the one who's that's idealized and that's the good thing. And I'm not taking away for a moment that there's importance in being in yeshiva. If it wasn't for yeshiva, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be a rabbi. None of your rabbis would be there.
And college is also seen as very dangerous
because of ideas, because of meeting non-Jews, because of all kinds of things you could throw in college. But today you have Jewish colleges if you'd like to get around it.
Yeshiva in New York that you can go and study in and that you can get.
But you're going to find a certain crowd that's there and a certain crowd that's not there, and we all know who we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And essentially, what I always tell my wife is, like, but they still, the truth is in Hasidic circles, not Chabad, and not just in Satmar and Babov and Belz, those men actually work. They don't have this ideal to be in Kollel. The Hasidic community works.
They got the diamond trade on
all the diamonds and the electronics and insurance companies and all kinds of things like that.
For 50 years.
Very very often vocational trades, plumbers, electricians, all kinds of things like that. And not so much by the ladies, but more by the men. There is such an idea to work. Mostly in the non-Hasidic Orthodox community is it looked down upon. Normally, I'm not giving you a rule because you can find breaks in that rule in either camp. Why am I sharing all this with you? I told my wife that I struggle very much with this whole model. I struggle with the model that this is what Rabbi Peretz said in the ketubah. The husband is promising to support his wife. It's okay if she supports him, but he has an obligation to support her. So if Peretz says that the husband definitely shouldn't make a shuvah chamura because he's going to be breaking his word every day that he doesn't go to work. And he says that's a sad thing that exists in our generation where that's considered like a Jewish value. Additionally, I told my wife that I see a lot of wasted talent. It seems to be that when you're religious today, and especially if you're a girl, you're finishing high school, there are certain fields like that's okay to go into, and certain fields that nobody goes into. For example, every Jewish girl that I dated was an occupational therapist. Why? I don't know. I don't know what it is with occupational therapy. Maybe they're giving them out for free in Beis Yaakov. Okay. Yeah. And by the way, it is true. That's an important. When these girls want to start a family and have children, they want to make sure they can have a job where they can work, but they're not spending 8 to 7 every day in an office building. And there is value to that. I'm not taking away from it. Everyone was a graphic designer. Everybody was a preschool teacher, and it was like something in that genre. No doctors, lawyers, no accountants, no just I don't want to say upper class, but more higher paying jobs. Let's say it didn't exist in that community.
A profession would compete with what they were supposed to do.
Exactly, and I said especially since these are not people that come from. They're not from deprived homes. These are very intelligent people. And if they were to go through such a system, could come out with very high jobs and I remember when I was in yeshiva in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins University would come and recruit from us without SATs. You didn't have to take an SAT to get into yeshiva and to college because they felt the yeshiva boys made the best lawyers. And they would recruit from the yeshiva because they valued the amount of thinking power that we had in yeshiva. And so for them, it was worth it. And if we only thought of ourselves as being worth it, then you would see a different change. Why does everyone have to be a secretary? Nothing wrong with being a secretary, but why is that the profession of choice? Because a person isn't able to get an education. Even worse, what happens when they don't let people study secular studies in high school?
What studies is it?
Secular studies.
I never understood.
No, I didn't hear that.
When I went to yeshiva, you didn't have a choice. That was a must. But then I left that yeshiva and I realized that's very rare. In Israel, there are very few Orthodox schools that teach secular studies for high school, for boys and girls. In New York, in Lakewood, in all kinds of places.
It makes it very hard to get any jobs.
How are you going to get a job if you're in a 6th grade level of English? That's the problem. And then a kid turns 18, and not everyone's cut out to be a rabbi. Not every rabbi has to be an idiot who doesn't know how to add and subtract. Right? That's also something. But let's say that his ideal was to be a rabbi, so he spent his whole life studying on Talmud and whatever. But not everyone is going to make that decision when they turn. And then when they're 18, they have to now find a way to make a livelihood without knowing how to have basic skills.
So what's your projection for the future?
You might think that this is. It's extreme. Most of the rabbis that I know grew up in this system. This is a system that they're a part of, that their children grow up in. It's a big problem. It's an epidemic, and you probably don't know because you're not so involved in education, at least in that community. But if you were to just look at it for a moment, you would be blown away by it. Not in a good way.
So what's the future? I mean, what happens? I mean, you can't have starving families all over the place. Eventually, people swing back the other way out of necessity, out of desire, out of a wish to own something. People get jealous, envious, whatever.
It happens in a number of ways, and I'm definitely aware that I'm over time, and we're going to continue this next week. But I want to answer just a regular achat on one foot. What I've been watching in this world is a few things. The first thing is very often people who end up getting a career, going to work, feel not part of that community anymore. And the first step is they start to become less observant, because observance in their head is that. And if I'm not that, then why bother keeping Shabbat? Why bother keeping kosher? Why bother? And that's ironic, because that group of Jews are stabbing themselves in the back, because they're losing people who are going to make the inevitable decision to. Nobody wants to be. No ideal in the world makes you want to be poor and not have food in your refrigerator.
Exactly.
Nobody. Any human being in that situation is going to want to find a way out. What it does do are other problems. In Israel, there's a big problem, and the problem is that you can't work in Israel unless you've served in the military. Unfortunately, in the Orthodox community in Israel, most of it, not all of it, Baruch Hashem, there's some people that are with the program, serving in the Israeli military is considered as if you're not at all religious.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't just harm you, but it could be that, let's say I would choose to go to the military because I want to go work afterwards or get an education afterwards. My sister wouldn't get a shidduch, and my father could lose his job, and they wouldn't count them as a minion in the synagogue. And so the peer pressure that exists, of course, that's not a joke. And again,
that is terrible. That is absolutely.
Remember we spoke last week about how many rabbis are actually Zionists?
Yes, we do.
Okay, this is part of that discussion. I'm not going to bring it up more than I should. But go ask them what do they think about this model, and they'll tell you they think it's a great model. And so it's a lot of pressure on me, even if I want to break out of the box, not to ever go to the Israeli military, because I'll ruin it for my whole family, not just for myself. I could be brave, but on whose expense? And so what you have is people who are then forced into this situation where in Israel it's illegal to work unless you serve in the military. So they don't go to work because they don't have a choice, because they can't do the inevitable. And the Israeli government, instead of saying, oh, you know what, we'll let them skip the army part and go straight into the workforce, straight into education, they're so adamant that these guys should go serve in the military that they won't let them integrate into the workplace, which is okay. That's considered semi-okay. And you have a whole bunch of people, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people, who are in a situation where they don't want to be in.
But don't you think,
How can it last?
if you live in a country, don't you think you owe the country something?
No, but I'm going to give him to my wife in just a minute. Yeah?
I would give him a bottle.
No, he doesn't have a bottle in the fridge though.
Tired.
Yeah. Sorry. So what you have is, what did you just say?
That you owe the country
that you owe the country something. If you live in it, you owe.
Yeah, but that argument has all kinds of sides to it. I'm not here now to talk about the army versus not the army. But there are certain stigmas that exist, and one of them is you have to be aware that in a certain community, doing that is going to cause damage to a person, whereas going to work won't.
That they would even think like that.
Can I insert one question too?
Yeah.
Do you think that another reason that the woman is expected to stay in the home and not go out is because does that lead to divorces or something? She meets somebody out there who is working?
Well, not necessarily to divorce, but there's definitely a fear of mingling, but that goes on the men as well, not just on the ladies. I mean, I've told men before, I went to your wedding last night, and you had a mechitza that went up to the high heavens, but at work you have this 18-year-old secretary just out of college interning for you. She's with you in the office alone for 7 hours a day, and that's okay for you, but having dinner at the same table at a wedding for an hour and a half in front of the whole world, that's not okay?
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain things that just, people didn't think the entire process through. They just stopped it. But I have to share with you, there's also a beautiful side to it, and that is, like I told you, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those yeshivot and wasn't for those kolos, and there has to be change. The problem is you can't force change so fast, and there are people who think that they're going to solve this problem in a day. Unfortunately, a lot of this has to be done by people like you and I, pushing this issue to rabbis, to lay leaders, to community leaders. It has to be an issue. There are big rabbis today whose names you know, who don't support men or women getting jobs, studying, going to college, doing any of these things that you might sound like it's so normal, it's the way the world works. What do you do? And they make it seem like Jews forever have been living their lives like this. This system doesn't exist more than 60 years ago. 60 years ago, this whole craziness started. You never heard about it before. In the olden days, you had rabbis who had jobs. I mean, that was part of the way Jews lived, and that's the way Hashem asks us to live. And if you look in our Jewish sources, Hashem very often says you have to event Torah. What does it say? Event Kemach and Torah, event Torah and Kemach. You have to have both. You have to have a job, and you have to study Torah, and all these things. And this is a part of a much longer discussion, which we continue next week, which is about, so where does the lady stand? Where does the lady stand in this entire discussion? God willing, next month.